Hello, I'm Mark Diano.
And I'm Desiree Hadley, and welcome to Hold the Line with Mayor Rajay Baraka. So how you doing, Mayor?
Hey, I'm good.
Good. So can you just briefly explain why you decided to bring us together for this forum today?
Well, I thought that it was necessary to have kind of frank, open dialogue discussions about topics that people have been thinking about in the community that usually get filtered through press and other things like that. And you don't really get the full story. And sometimes you don't get to address really specific issues that people have. And this gives me an opportunity to do that in an environment I feel comfortable with. I can talk regular off the cuff and say things that I want to say.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's get right to it then, Mayor. Our topics today are violence and masks.
Yeah,
Two topics that are currently, big in the community.
right.
And so we'll ask you a couple questions about those two things. So I'll start with violence, which is, I've been covering the city and I've seen the bad old days as you have, right?
Yeah.
So a few weeks ago, there was an article about the growing trust in the community between the police and the community. And there's been a lot of transformation in the demographics, in the training, in the community involvement, and the violence suppression. It's been great. What is the next level in your mind of where do you take the force and public safety in this community next?
Well, as long as one person dies, it's too many. Like, people are always judged by the last person that's been shot and murdered, and I understand that. That's why I'm walking this line between defund and policing and reducing crime is a fine line for mayors who are trying to transform their communities. And I think the next level is the violence office that we're creating, the opportunity to get community-based strategies and initiatives around decreasing crime and reducing the level of violence that happens in our community by using community-based organizations and working closely with the police department to do that. I think it shows some promise, and the Office of Violence Prevention is going to help us expand and do that even further. Yeah.
So the next question we're going to touch on is masks. So there are people not only in Newark but everywhere who believe masks aren't necessary. For instance, there were people shouting downtown Newark that masks are not necessary and that it's about strengthening one's immune system. They were telling others that they refuse to put on a mask. What do you have to say to those people who firmly believe this pandemic is not a threat to them?
Well, it's certainly a threat to hundreds of thousands of people in New Jersey who have it,
Right.
and tens of thousands who have died. Almost 700 in Newark alone have passed away from this. So I do believe you should strengthen your immune system. You absolutely should do that. You should take vitamins. You should exercise. You should do all those things. But there are thousands of people who can't do that.
Right.
And even if they did, it wouldn't help them, right? There's seniors who are over 60, 70 years old who are not running in the track. They're not taking vitamins. Their life they have more days behind them than they have in front of them. That's not a prescription that you give to a 70-year-old grandfather in a senior home. That's not what you tell them. You don't tell that to a kid that has diabetes who was born with it, right? He's 14, 15 years old out here with diabetes or asthma or high blood pressure. You don't say that to those people. That won't work for them. Obviously, the only thing that's going to work for them is to stay away from the virus and keeping you away from them,
Right.
if that's the way you think, right? You need to put on a mask to protect those people. That's a very selfish kind of stance to have. Take some vitamins, do some exercises, God is going to save me type of thing. It's just, it's selfish.
Right. I agree.
Okay, let's go back to the homicides because a lot of times the city's judged by that, as you know. So they're down again nearly 30%, right? But we had that spike after the George Floyd protests, as have other cities. Does that dismay you that after the Black Lives Matter protest, that then we have the same, actually a higher level of gunplay in the streets?
Yeah, it does. And I think it's a combination of things that are happening. We're about to have a Zoom meeting with a bunch of these organizations around the country to talk about the increase in violence and defund and Black Lives Matter all together and what we think is happening in our community. I think it's just a myriad of different things, just increased unemployment, stress and pressure from COVID that's happening in these communities. The crimes of opportunity. People, the police are not out, people are out. They get to see you out like this because it's been hot, and so they're taking advantage of that. And these are the same people who would have done this even if COVID didn't exist. They would have done it. They're just taking advantage of the opportunity to do it now. And I think in some places around the country, the police are actually laying down on the job. I believe that some of them are not doing what they're supposed to do on purpose. And it is also adding to the increased level of violence that you see around here, which means that we need more alternative strategies and more collaboration and cooperation with the police department to actually deal with these things.
Okay. I have two questions in one about, we're still on the subject of violence. So this past Sunday, a 21-year-old young woman was shot and killed in Bradley Court around 10:20 p.m.
Yeah.
It's now, unfortunately, that's really sad that happened. It's now 3 days later with no arrests have been made. There are no suspects in mind, according to the article that was written about it. With the massive amount of technology and cameras throughout the city, what do you say to those who will ask, how is it possible for Newark to experience such a high number in unsolved murders when they have technology to help solve these murders? And the second part of the question is, there are officers that are responsible for investigating these murders equipped with the knowledge to solve these crimes?
Well, I think we got some good officers, a good intelligence unit that have been turning over a lot of these cases. Mm-hmm. And I think that this case is going to be solved too as well. The issue is the camera by itself is not sufficient, right? Sometimes the camera is not completely clear. Sometimes that's all we have and we need a corroborating witness. Right. And so all of those things come into play. And so what the police do really is they don't investigate homicides. And folks need to understand that. What they do is make the arrest. They try to help the prosecutor's office get witnesses, do other things of that nature. But the prosecutor's office investigates homicides. Once it's a homicide, then it's out of our hands, and it goes above us, and they do the actual prosecution. We try to get them as much evidence as we possibly can to help with the prosecution.
Okay, so the prosecutor's office would be the Essex County Prosecutor's Office. Not a lot of people know that.
Yeah, Essex County Prosecutor's Office investigates homicide. If it's just a shooting
right.
and it doesn't turn into a homicide, then we do the investigation here with us.
Okay.
And sometimes we do get involved. We try to get involved and help out as much as we can in terms of homicides. And frankly, I think those are the ones that get solved quicker, the ones that we get involved in.
Okay. All
right.
Back to the masks. Now, we had that situation, the party in Bradley Beach where the kids were killed on the way home.
Yeah.
You were talking about the thing down in Jackson where there were Newark people with the 700 people. We have gatherings in our own city of multiple people that, this has to be really frustrating for you that somehow this message is not getting out. And you've got a mask up campaign where we have signs, we talk about it on Facebook Live. How do you get this message through to people who just seem to be defiant?
Yeah. Frank, just first, I think we're doing a lot better than many other cities, so I'm just thankful for that, and many other states. But New Jersey was on one of the only 3 states that were on the list to contain coronavirus. It's not on the list anymore. So there's only one state in America that's on that list, is Vermont. We're off the list, and it's because of that. Because of parties, because of 35 lifeguards are sick at Ocean County. And I think that we got a little excited, a lot of pressure on the state to open things up without a real local strategy and a local plan. So the governor says, we're going to go to the beach, but there's no real local strategy on how you're going to facilitate that so it doesn't get out of control. Or we're going to have 250 people outside. How do you facilitate that so it doesn't get out of control? The county gives a permit for somebody to have a basketball tournament. it turns out to be 700 to 1,000 people. Where's the local help to make sure that that doesn't get out of control? Then, once the governor says you can go outside, then you have these kind of cookouts, other kind of events, and people do not follow the kind of protocol that we need. And they think because they know people that they're safe, and that's not true. And so we have to cut down on these parties, on these barbecues, cut down on these festivals that people are trying to have under the guise of outdoor eating, these parties that people are having. We have to stop it. I mean, people have to realize that you have to forego 1 month, 2 months of a summer so you can have 7 more months of a summer, 7 more years of a summer. You're going to have summer that's not going anywhere. It'll be here next year, and the year after, and the year after that. What you have to do is discipline yourself so we can contain this virus, and that's more important than anything.
Let me ask you a follow-up question to that, because I'm sure there's a lot of economic pressure on you, and then social pressure on you from the people that elected you and represent.
Yeah.
You must be, you've used the word several times, draconian measures. There's got to be a lot of pressure on you. How are you dealing with that?
Well, I just do what I think is the right thing to do. Like, I'm not going to succumb to something that I think, like, on my mind, I know it's ridiculous, right? And I think the primary goal is to get as many people across the finish line as you can. Once this thing subsides, history is going to tell the story. How many people lived, how many people died, like how many people got sick. What actions did you take as a local official, as a state official, as the president of the United States to protect the people's lives that are under your care? How much resources did you use to keep people afloat during a very dangerous and precarious moment such as this? And that's what I think about, and I try to get those things done. When people get mad because I say, put on a damn mask, I don't care. Frankly, it doesn't bother me. And if I lose your vote because I said put on a damn mask, then I really didn't have your vote anyway. That's how I feel about it. And I'm not doing that to get votes. I'm doing that because my friends and family live here, and I don't want you to get them sick. My mother lives in this community. My nieces, my nephews, my son, my daughters come back and forth. They live here. And I don't want New Jersey and Newark to be Florida, to be Miami, to be Arizona. I talk to those mayors, You got cities that have 20, 30% positivity rate. And it's ridiculous after all these months to have that. We're at about 5%. I'm trying to get us below 5%. We were at 68%. And we certainly can't go back there. We cannot. And we have to be as strict as we need to. I think that's just the principle in me sometimes. It comes out. I can't keep it in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It comes out like, go to class, type of thing,
All right, so next question, we're on the topic of violence still. So mine is a little personal.
It's okay.
All right, so this literally happened this weekend. So I live downtown Newark in an apartment building, and across from me there's another building that has a lot of drug activity. So it was about 4 p.m., broad daylight. My mom was coming, parking the car, getting out the car, and she literally seen 2 young men shooting at each other.
Wow.
So luckily no one was hurt, no one was shot or killed or even injured, but at the same time, she questioned, and a lot of people do question, in this area, cops are always ticketing cars, and some people, what do you say to people who feel like, the cops will stop to give me a ticket, but at this time when this shooting was happening, before or after, there was no police presence.
That's always the case.
Right. And the police, precinct is literally a couple blocks away on Franklin Street. So what do you say to people who feel like, you don't hesitate to give me a ticket, but when there's a shooting, I can't get it?
Well, actually, the precinct, that's not the precinct. The precinct is right there on Market
Street, okay.
That mini precinct, but then the real precinct for this district is down in the east, down in Ironbound.
Okay.
But you're right. And the idea is that the police should be in those communities, and I think that sometimes we take downtown living for granted because we're up in these other areas, and there's not a lot of violence to that level in these areas down here, and so we're super focused on the west and super focused on the south and parts of the central, and sometimes we forget about these communities down here, and we need to make sure that we're down here policing them the same way that we police the neighborhoods, or at least similar. I wouldn't say the same way, but
Right.
similar to what's going on up there. And the community has to make complaints. They have to organize and have meetings and invite the captains to the meetings and talk about the various things that's going on in their neighborhood. I think that's the only way to really get a handle on some of the things that you think are not happening the right way. You have to invite these people to your community and have meetings with them.
Okay. All right.
The common denominator, of course, is guns.
Guns.
Guns. So
Yeah.
we have a lot of distraction now, between COVID and the police brutality and these other issues. The gun issue is kind of quieted down a
Well, I
little
think
bit.
all of it is the same, really. Like New Jersey has some of the most strict gun laws in the nation, right? People always say there's illegal guns on the street, but they didn't buy them illegally most of the time. They went to Virginia and Pennsylvania and bought them pretty legally and brought them back. They become illegal because it's illegal in New Jersey. Then they distribute them on the street illegally, and people get their hands on them, and they use them in illegal activity. And so we do need stronger national gun laws. But this brings us back to the question of police versus defunding, right? So on the one hand, you have this level of violence that goes on in the community. Her mother can't call a social worker to that event.
Right.
Two men shooting at each other. You just can't. You need a cop, right?
Right.
And the police have to respond to that. And the idea is that we don't want police. We just don't want police killing us and shooting us and beating us and abusing us simply because of where we live or the color of our skin. But we do need protection. You need protection as long as we live in a society that has that level of inequity, where there's poverty at this rate, miseducation, our inability to deal with mental health, all these kind of issues that exist in our community, drug addiction, the illicit drug trade in these communities, which fuels gun violence and all these other kind of things. Then you're always going to need the level of policing that we have. In order to reduce the level of policing, we have to address those issues.
Right.
And you begin to address those issues through like the Violence Prevention Office, treating crime as a public health issue, making sure it's not a cyclical kind of thing of violence that happens every year or it goes up and down, up and down, up and down, that you address those issues straight on. And like Trump is sending people to Chicago for murders that have been happening in Chicago for the last 15 years. Chicago just didn't get off the hook during COVID. People
Right.
being killed in Chicago like this for a long time, and all over the country, by the way. So if you're going to send agents to every major city in America, or you're going to send relief. And relief is what we need. We don't really need troops. We need money for jobs. We need money for education, for infrastructure, for job training, right? That's what we need money for. We need resources for those things, for housing and making sure that people have what they need adequately, right? And if they had those things, they would be less apt to participate in what's going on out here in the street, and families be more stabilized, right? Because we have a serious destabilization of our families, and I think it's purposeful. And then you get the access to guns and drugs in your community, because ain't nobody flying to Afghanistan to bring in cocaine. Nobody's taking a plane. That's a movie that they had, that they made up. The guy flew to Vietnam, got drugs, and brought it back. That's not the regular thing that's happening in these communities.
As a leader among urban mayors, do you have a plan to go after the federal government on some type of federal government gun regulation to sort of level this playing field finally?
Yeah, we've been involved in all of the national organizations and I would say kind of movements to have stricter gun laws on a national level to ban automatic rifles and all the other kind of things. We're in all of those committees and groups, and we're pushing. And I honestly think that a lot of this stuff is not going to happen until you have new leadership down in D.C. and a turnover in some of the legislators that are there. That's what needs to happen in order for us to get any movement on some of this stuff. Because right now, the NRA just has the place hostage, and so we need to begin to push that stuff on a national level. Or, well, I should say we need to begin to remove some of those people from down there so the things that we are pushing can see the light of day.
All right, so last question. What do you think the correlation is, if any, between violence and the requirement to wear a mask? Do you think there's a correlation of defiance there, the fact that there's a peak in violence and the people refuse to wear masks? Like, what do you think that?
Well, not really. I just think that there are a bunch of people who don't want to wear masks.
Right.
They wear their seatbelt, you know, they put on sunglasses, they don't want to wear masks, right? They protect, and it's just being in a society that teaches us teaches us that freedom is individualism and selfishness. That we have this personal liberty to do whatever we want, regardless of whom it hurts. And we learn this type of stuff when we grow up in a society that preaches that to us. And we get confused and we don't take personal liberty and equate it with personal responsibility. So while you have the right to do things doesn't mean you should do them all the time. And you're in a community. And because you're in a community, we're in a contract. We have a social contract. And because we're in a social contract, that means that I'm willing to give up some of my personal liberty in order to allow us to live comfortably as a collective or grow comfortably as a collective. And so there are laws that inhibit people from doing what they want to do. I can't play my music loud as I want at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Why? Because I live in a community with other people, right? And they may have little children or seniors or somebody that's ill. I have to have some kind of idea about who lives next to me. And that's the point. It's not really about you and this mass. It's about you being in our community. Regardless of what your religious fundamentalism tells you or any other kind of thing that you come up with, you live in a community with other people. And you have to, abide by what our collective policies and rules are to keep us all safe.
Right. All right, Mayor, thank you for that answer.
No problem.
And that's all we have time for today and for tonight's first episode of Hold the Line. Make sure you check out the next episode coming soon, and make sure everyone out there in Newark, mask up.
Mask up.
Mask up.
Great, Mayor.
Thank you.